evening, and just to mention that this is being recorded, so we're able to see who's here. If you want to use the closed caption option, please click on the three dots with the word more underneath, and then select the closed caption, and you'll be able to see and hear what's being said. So thank you for that. My name is Alex Yandel. I'm the Strategic Planning and Placemaking Manager at Stafford Borough Council, and I'm joined on the screen by three others from the team who will introduce themselves. So starting with Neil.
Hello everyone, my name's Neil Holly. I'm a Principal Planning Officer in Alex's team.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Jenny Bolton. I'm also a Principal Planning Officer within the team.
And Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Mulligan. I'm the Environmental Planning Officer, also I'm part of the team.
Great, thank you. So what I'm going to do is we'll go through some brief housekeeping, then there will be a short 2-minute video followed by a presentation, and then questions and answers before we close. And this session will go on for about an hour. So this is our first time of doing a webinar, so please bear with us in terms of the technology. If we do have any glitches or issues, please stay in the room and we'll try and reconnect and keep going. As I said, this is being recorded, and so this recording will be shown on our website in due course. So you'll be able to look back over this at your leisure. Now, just so that you're aware, we're not able to see or hear you who are as part of this webinar. So in order to interact with the question and answer session as we go through the video and the presentation, if you have any questions for us, then please put them in the chat facility, and then at the end I will bring Neil, Jenny and Megan back in to start providing some answers to those questions. We won't be putting any answers to questions in the chat itself, but we will be providing some generic answers to the questions and updating our frequently asked questions page on the website after this to capture anything that we may not do as part of this session. So what we will do now is you will continue to see me. Neil, Jenny and Megan will switch their cameras off, and Megan is going to start the video for us to be able to see, and after that then I will come back in. Thank you.
Here's our new local plan, which will help guide future development in Stafford Borough until 2040. And from now until the 12th of December 2022, you can tell us what you think about it. We want a borough that is prosperous and attractive, with strong communities. So how can a local plan help achieve this? By ensuring potential developers follow guidelines on climate change, the economy, new housing, protecting our environment and transport. This plan helps make the decisions on what development can happen, where it can happen and when it can happen. The Local Plan 2020 to 2040 aims to deliver 10,700 new houses as part of major developments, with 6,200 already underway. This includes affordable housing for those in need, but these new homes must be in the right place and of the highest possible quality. So where will they go? Major sites include large areas north and west of Stafford Town, the exciting new Stafford Station Gateway regeneration, and a completely new garden village in the north of the borough, with 6,000 new homes, schools, GP surgery, railway station on the West Coast Main Line, and employment land proposed to be delivered through to 2040 and beyond. New homes are also planned for Stone, Nosal and Woods Eaves. We have benefited hugely from new employment developments over recent years, and this is crucial to the growth of the borough. The local plan wants to build on this success by allocating additional employment sites north of Stafford and one at Ladford Fields near Great Bridgeford. We need to recognise the importance of the tourism sector and take advantage of our exceptional natural environment and industrial heritage, with attractions welcoming both national and international visitors. We will continue to address the impacts of climate change with adaptation and mitigation measures in place, and our local plan will provide the key policies and proposals to do this. That way we can support responsible development alongside environmental projects such as protecting the floodplains while diversifying habitats for important plants and animals. Now you've seen and heard a brief overview of what it's all about. It's your turn to share your thoughts. You can find out more about the local plan preferred options from the Borough Council website, and look out for our exhibitions taking place across the area. Please don't miss this opportunity to tell us what you think. We look forward to hearing from you.
So, thank you very much for seeing that that short video, and now I hope that you're able to see me in the bottom corner and hear me, and that you can see a presentation screen in front of you. So what I'm now going to do is work through this presentation to provide you with a little bit more information about the local plan, the planning process, and then the details about the consultation. And then when I finish, I'll switch the presentation off, and I will introduce the others on the team who will then go through and answer your questions that hopefully have been put in the chat. So bear with me. So the local plan preferred options, further details about the local plan preferred options are available on our website at www.staffordbc.gov.uk. And if you go to the home page and then scroll down, you'll see an image of a couple of houses. If you click on that, that will take you to the dedicated web page for the preferred option, and you'll be able to see all of the details, including the main document, summary information, and a detailed evidence base on that web page. Also linked to that web page is a dedicated separate web page for the Meath community, and you'll be able to view further information about that proposal as well. So what I'm going to do as part of this presentation is explain the position in terms of our current plan, what the new plan will be doing, its purpose, progress, and the latest timetable, before then going through and introducing the preferred options itself, and then follow it. And then at the end, I will provide you with some details about the preferred option consultation process, which this is a part. So we currently have an adopted plan for Stafford Borough that covers the plan period 2011 to 2031, and a part 2 which shows the settlement boundaries for key settlements across the borough. All of this local plan, the adopted plan, is based on statutory and national planning policy, and it's supported by a number of neighbourhood plans that have been produced by parishes to show the local expression of what local communities want to achieve in their area. So you can see the list of made neighbourhood plans on the screen. The new plan 2020 to 2040 will replace the currently adopted plan, and will take a fresh look at those neighbourhood plans that have been prepared, and may well make some changes to those neighbourhood plans. So I just needed to explain that context. So the purpose of the plan is to set out the strategic and spatial approach for the future development of the borough for the next 20 years, including proposed sites, policies and provision. And the local plan is used to determine planning applications across the borough, and its main focus is to deliver new economic growth, housing provision for our local communities and protecting our valuable natural environment through a sustainable development approach. As part of the new plan, we're considering a new garden community in the borough, and when we went out with our issues and options consultation a couple of years ago, we introduced this concept by identifying 7 potential options of where a garden community could go. And this stage, we've selected one of those options to take forward as part of the plan process. And the whole purpose is to make sure that we're providing certainty to residents and businesses in the future. So as I mentioned, a couple of consultations have already taken place as part of the local plan process, and we are continuing to produce evidence-based reports to underpin and provide further detail about the proposals and policies that we've included. There's an ongoing call for sites exercise where landowners and developers have the opportunity to put forward sites that we can consider through the local plan process, and we monitor the completions and commitments both of housing and employment on an annual basis. The statement of community involvement sets out how we engage local communities and businesses and other stakeholders in the local plan process, and I'll shortly go on to show you the local development scheme, which is our timetable. But before I do that, I just will touch briefly on the sustainability appraisal. And at this stage, we have produced this interim sustainability appraisal report that looks at the range of options that we can consider, uses the evidence base that has been prepared, and then explains why the preferred option has been selected and shows how that compares against social, environmental and economic objectives. So the interim sustainability appraisal is a really important document that sits alongside the new local plan preferred option. So as I mentioned, we have a timetable for the local plan, and you can see that we're now at the preferred option stage, October to December 2022. The next steps in terms of the local plan is to consider the responses that we received to the preferred option. So please do submit your comments and views by 12 noon on Monday, the 12th of December. And we will then consider those as we prepare the publication version of the plan, and we will go out for further consultation in July to September next year. And the publication plan is the version of the plan that the Borough Council would wish to have adopted. But before that can take place, it needs to go through an examination process before the plan is finally adopted and can be used for determining planning applications in October 2024. So the preferred option for the local plan, an overview of this can be seen in the non-technical summary that we've made available, and the communication plan shows how we're engaging with the communities. The preferred option includes a vision and set of objectives, followed by a development strategy and a climate change response, and then a dedicated chapter on the Meesbrook Garden community, and a series of proposed allocations including housing, employment, gypsies and local green space, followed by the development management policies in a series of chapters which I will introduce shortly. So it's always important to set the stage for the local plan, which is done by an introduction explaining its purpose, how it fits within the statutory and national policy context, the evidence base that's been prepared, including the sustainability appraisal, and the duty to cooperate, which is all about how we engage with our neighbouring authorities, in terms of their developments and some statutory agencies, including the Environment Agency, Natural England and Historic England as part of the process. We then identify a series of key issues and challenges that we envisage over the next 20 years and provide that spatial portrait for the local area. Then that leads into a clear vision and a series of objectives that then underpin what is then expressed through the development strategy, the proposed allocations and the development management policies themselves. And this includes a focus on net zero, the economy in town centres, housing growth, delivering infrastructure to support that new development, health and well-being, high quality design and protecting the natural environment. And there are some key aspects of the evidence base that reflect the objectives that we've prepared. So this slide shows the development strategy itself and some policies, and alongside the policies is an expression of the strategy for Stafford and for Stone as the two principal settlements within the borough. It's important to make clear that climate change and our response to climate change must be included in the local plan, and this is centre stage as part of this preferred option approach. And the area which you will see shortly as on the key diagram has two areas of green belt within Stafford Borough, and those green belt areas are protected and designated, and there aren't any changes to the green belt boundaries as part of this local plan stage. So you can now see the key diagram for Stafford Borough with the areas of green belt to the north around the North Staffordshire conurbation, and then to the southeast part of the West Midlands green belt, which is overlaid by the area of outstanding natural beauty and the special area of conservation. You can clearly see the legend as part of the key diagram that explains the various elements to it, and in the bottom left-hand corner are the proposed allocations, which you're able to see further detail in the document itself. There's a dotted red line across the area of the borough, and that identifies a zone of influence which we collect money from in order to mitigate for the housing development and provide mitigation projects for the special area of conservation at Cannock Chase. Meesbrook can clearly be seen as the orange area on the map, which is just to the west of Stone and just to the north of Eccleshaw, as well as the environmental areas and designations. Turning to Stafford, it's possible to see two areas of red lines boundaries, which are the strategic development locations in the existing plan that have been being progressed and accounted for as part of the new plan in order to continue that level of development for Stafford Town. And then finally on the map, there are a number of proposed housing allocations and employment areas which can be seen in purple and in light blue. So the overall development strategy is looking to deliver 10,700 new homes over the 20-year period and 80 hectares of employment land. But it's important to note that already 6,200 new homes have either been completed or have got commitments, so are coming forward on sites that we've already identified. So this plan identifies 4,500 new homes, of which 3,000 are identified proposed at Meesbrook, and the other 1,500 are elsewhere. And therefore, This is supported by employment development with two new employment sites, one to the north of Stafford, which is just over 31 hectares behind the Pets at Home new development, and at Ladford Fields, which is a recognised industrial estate. So turning to Stafford, in front of you, you can see the key diagram for Stafford town. And on this key diagram, it's possible to see a bit more detail about the strategic allocations, the protected employment areas, which is the cross-hatched blue, with the new employment development proposed site to the north of Stafford town. In the centre of the screen, you have the Stafford town centre boundary, and then to the west is the Stafford Station Gateway, where there will be approximately 1,000 houses, and then the Burleyfields area beyond that. The final thing just to identify on this map is, as well as the housing allocations, there is quite a significant area of countryside enhancement, which is the green cross-hatched area, which are the fingers, green wedges that broadly reflect the floodplain areas stretching into the middle of Stafford. And these countryside enhancement areas are a key positive response that we're making to the climate change in order to manage flood risk for the future, in order to provide recreation and leisure facilities to the local communities, and meet biodiversity net gain, which is a requirement under the Environment Act that came into effect last year. We all know that Stafford is well connected, and that's clear to see from this diagram with the M6 and the rail corridors. And finally, towards the southwest of this diagram, you have the Cannock Chase Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, which is Greenbelt, and also the Special Area of Conservation. So turning to Stone, this is the key diagram for Stone, which has the same legend approach on it. We have the countryside enhancement area as the green cross-hatching in the centre, with the Stone town centre in the middle of the screen. The protected employment areas, blue cross-hatched, and the proposed housing allocations are in light purple on the screen. And finally, just a reminder that the dotted red line across the map is the 15-kilometre zone of influence for the Cannock Chase Special Area of Conservation, and every house that's built within that area needs to deliver approximately £300 to support mitigation projects, and that sits alongside other infrastructure payments through Section 106 to support new development and make sure that sufficient services and facilities are provided for our local communities in the future. So this next slide shows the settlement hierarchy. In the adopted plan, we have identified Stafford, Stone and key service villages with settlement boundaries. The new plan goes further. It identifies not only Stafford and Stone and the larger settlements that are broadly the key service villages currently, but it also identifies the Meesbrook Garden community and a boundary for that, as well as Tier 5, which are smaller settlements. So every settlement that's got 50 or more houses has got a settlement boundary identified, and that shows the principle of development which is supported within the boundary, within the settlement boundary, but beyond the settlement boundary, that's classed as open countryside, and so therefore development and the types of development are restricted somewhat by being in that open countryside area. It's really important and be really great for you all to have a look at the detail of the settlement boundaries, and we've got a policies map for the borough as well as the individual insets to be able to view those particular boundaries. So turning to the climate change response, the plan is looking to do as much as it can towards net zero and the reducing emissions. And the planning process has a number of opportunities to do this, both through construction of new development and minimising the waste around that, as well as the efficiency of new developments in their own right. And so there's specific policies to achieve that, both in terms of housing and new commercial developments striving for net zero. Energy and water efficiency features are being supported by draft policies in the plan in order to do the best that we can towards meeting that climate change response. And finally, across the borough, there are a number of locations that are identified for solar and for wind, which could come forward in the future with the support of landowners in those particular areas. As I mentioned earlier, Meesbrook Garden Community is one of the options that we looked at previously, and this is the first time that the council is consulting directly through the planning system on the proposed Meesbrook Garden Community, which is adjacent to Coldmease in the north of the borough. And so there are some clear principles that have been set out to deliver a sustainable community in that location that will then obviously reduce the pressure on existing settlements and their services and facilities in the borough. So it's important this is not just housing and employment, but a whole range of infrastructure, services and facilities, including new schools, to make sure that it is a sustainable place for the future. And as part of that, we will be looking to deliver 3,000 new homes in this plan period, supported by employment land, and a further 3,000 homes beyond 2040. Final thing to mention is on that Meesbrook dedicated web page, there's an opportunity to have a look at a vision and a development charter together with an indicative master plan at this stage and some important transport evidence base. So please spend some time and have a look at that. And it's important to say that we're on a journey as part of this plan and on a journey in terms of moving forward with Meesbrook. So there'll be further consultation and engagement through the course of next year on this particular proposal. So at this stage, we're looking at the principles of including Meesbrook, but there will be more detail to come. There are other proposed site allocations included in the preferred option, including 1,500 new homes, of which 1,000 will be at Stafford, a few hundred at Stone, and then 100 each for Nosal and Woodseaves. And as I've mentioned earlier, there's over 36 hectares of new employment land, the majority being north of Stafford and also at Ladford Fields, which is one of the rural recognised industrial estates. We have a diverse community, and part of that community are gypsies and travellers. And so the evidence that we've prepared identifies that 25 new pitches are required for that community within the borough over the plan period. And we've been fortunate that 2 proposed sites have been put forward, which we can show within the preferred option, one at Hopton and the other at Amerton on the road between Weston and Uttoxeter. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that there's reference to local green spaces in existing settlements. Neighbourhood plans that have been adopted and made have already identified a whole range of local green spaces that are important to local communities and have been carefully considered in terms of their role. This plan proposes 19 additional local green spaces that have been put forward by local communities. And so we're asking for some feedback and some responses to those local green spaces as part of our existing settlements and their sustainable future. So what I will now do is briefly introduce the proposed development management policies in the plan before finishing off with the final details about how we're engaging the public. So the economic policies are looking to deliver growth. You've already seen areas of protected employment land within Stafford and Stone. We also have rural recognised industrial estates identified on the maps and major developed sites in the Greenbelt that we are protecting for employment uses in the future. Following the lessons of the last couple of years, there's a focus on supporting home working and supporting small scale, small and medium sized enterprises through employment uses across our borough. Town centres continue to be important places for vitality and viability, and so we have policies to support the town centres alongside our important rural areas, which provide a living for people through the agricultural and forestry development sector, as well as our important development areas for tourism and the canal network that attract people from across the country to our area. So the next slide shows the housing policies to support our existing and future communities. These housing policies strive to deliver homes for life, and we're conscious of the demographic of our borough, and that will be changing and adapting over the next 20 years. So it's important to make sure that we've got the policies in place to meet those future needs, not least affordable housing. Not everyone is able to afford their own homes, and so affordable housing will continue to be an important element of moving forward with our new plan, and making sure that essentially the right types of houses are in the right place and are respecting the existing communities and what happens in our rural areas. So that suite of housing policies will be looking to achieve that and guide decision making through the planning application process. High quality design is always something that's important that we strive to achieve, as well as providing access to services. Clearly, it's important to work closely with our local communities to understand what they want to achieve through the design, but also the developers and landowners as they bring forward their land in this part of the world, and as well as meeting their responsibilities for delivery structure, not least for new schools and new roads, health services, etc. So the policies include protecting our community facilities and making sure that electronic communications are effective in the future as new development comes forward. And at the bottom, there's a policy there on renewable and low carbon energy. So turning to the environment, which I've already mentioned as part of this presentation, there will be policies relating to managing flood risk and sustainable drainage as new development come forward, protecting our landscapes, promoting and conserving and enhancing our blue-green infrastructure networks, not least through the countryside enhancement areas, and making sure that biodiversity is supported, and we have now legal requirements to provide a 10% uplift in terms of biodiversity net gain, and that will be working alongside other policies on air quality, pollution and trees. And then the final chapter in terms of the policies is transport, which is reflected on this slide. It also includes information about parking and electric vehicle charging points standards in the future. The preferred option document includes a series of appendices that provides additional information to support the policies in the plan, and so these can be seen on the list in front of you as part of the document itself. But supporting this preferred option, there's a whole range of other evidence-based information which you can see on the screen that's been prepared specifically for this consultation to support the work that's been done. And I'd just like to draw your attention to the settlement assessment and site profile information. So all of the information that has been provided to us by the developers and landowners has been considered against the evidence base and then sifted. So sites have been gone through a careful process to take into account the utilities, transport, schools, ecology, heritage and landscape, to then identify the sites that are most appropriate to be proposed as allocations in the plan. As with this consultation and any responses that we received, they will be carefully considered as they were when we went out with the issues and options consultation to prepare this stage of the plan. The whole plan viability assessment looks at the plan in terms of its proposals, its allocations and its policies, and tests the through interaction with the market and the current experience that we have, what can be delivered and what's viable for the future over the 20-year period. So it's not a snapshot, it projects what will happen over the next 20 years. So it's not affected particularly by the ebbs and flows in terms of the economic fortunes that we might be experiencing over the next year or so. And then finally, a series of topic papers have been prepared to provide some further information on the various chapters and policies to provide further detail. So before I move into a time of questions and answers, which I'll hand over to the team, I will just finish by showing you the communications plan of how we're engaging with our communities, which uses a statement of community involvement as the key cornerstone for achieving that, where we explain how we will be engaging with people and when we will be engaging with people. So as you are well aware, we've got the webinar that's happening this evening, which you're part of. And that will then lead into a series of 4 public exhibitions and workshops across the borough for the rest of this week and next week. So we have Eccleshall is tomorrow evening. We then have Nosal on Monday next week, Stone on Tuesday, and then Stafford the following Saturday, in order to engage with as part of the process, provide them with additional material that hasn't been presented this evening, including the opportunity to look at maps and those boundaries. So do please, if you are able to attend those exhibitions, please do. We'll be very pleased to see you. And do spread the word to others in your communities who may well be interested in coming to see us. And the whole approach is to engage with the communities, to get responses back to the local plan, and for us to be able to register those responses by and before Monday the 12th of December. So if you can please get any responses back to us by Monday the 12th of December, that would be much appreciated. So the final slide, you will be able to repeat what I've just been through and provides the detail of exactly where those consultation events are taking place, when they're taking place as well. So please take a note of that. We've tried to time them so that it engages as many people as possible from the mid to late afternoon into the evenings during the week, and then at Stafford Central Library on the Saturday through the late morning and into the mid-afternoon. So thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and what I will now do is stop presenting and I'll then ask my colleagues to join me on the screen, and you will have a break from listening to my voice, and I will hand over to them in order to answer some of the questions that have been put in the chat facility. Not every question will necessarily be answered this evening, but as I've said, we will make sure that the frequently asked questions is updated and put on our website over the next few days or so. So thank you very much, and we'll now hand into the question time.
Thank you, Alex. This is obviously slightly unusual format in that we can't see you, but there were lots of excellent questions that we've been trying to find answers to and pick out. I think there are lots of questions about Meesbook, so we might try and answer some of those first and then move on to some of the more wider ranging questions. I don't know, Jen, if you have a particular question you want to start on the Meesbook list.
Yes, that's fine. Obviously, one of the questions that has been asked is how we're going to ensure that Meesbook doesn't merge into Eccleshall and the surrounding area. And obviously that is a valid question since they are very closely related. At the moment, what you can see is the red line, which is the current land holding that we are putting forward in this preferred option. The answer is it's quite a short one. It's basically within the planning legislation, we don't actually want to see the villages merged together. So we will ensure via any application that the red line is maintained and that no spread to Eccleshall or the surrounding area is undertaken. And we will do that via the design of the buildings, ensuring that the green corridors and a buffer zone is implemented. So that at the moment is what we're saying. Obviously, devil's in the detail, and until we get the full plan, we can't verbally explain exactly how we will do it, but it's one of the key focuses for us that we keep the settlements separate. Another question that was asked is, why do we even need the garden village? Why aren't we using brownfield sites? So the short answer is we don't have enough brownfield sites within the borough to fulfill the housing requirements that we currently have. And one of the advantages of a garden village is we can plan it right from the beginning, and that ensures that sustainability is the focus of that village. So we will make sure that we're getting the infrastructure that's needed. We will be ensuring that it's got renewable energy as central for its energy requirements. We will look that it can be sustainable within itself in terms of the GP facilities, education, leisure facilities. So that's why we're saying it's better to have a garden village than trying to put additional pressures on Stafford and Stone, where the infrastructure is at a critical mass and we can't put the amount of growth we would need in those two areas. Neil, I don't know if you want to pick up on the demographic question.
Yeah, so there was a question about, I think the question was about the comments in the Meesbook transport study about the residents of Meesbook, a certain proportion will work in Stoke and a certain proportion will work in Stafford. I think the question implies why those houses shouldn't be built in Stoke and Stafford. I mean, as for houses being built in Stoke, is really a matter for Stoke Council. Obviously, Stafford Borough isn't an island, so we know that some of our residents will work outside of the borough. As for Stafford, and I suppose the fundamental question of why we would choose to do Meesbook rather than a further expansion to Stafford, as many will know, Stafford is growing. We have, as continued as part of this plan, both the western strategic development location and the northern strategic development location. And the view of the council in this preferred option is that it's beneficial to the borough to have another pole of growth. And of course, Stafford is the county town and the main centre of the borough. We can't pretend that that some Meesbrook residents, as for residents of other parts of the borough, won't work in Stafford and travel to Stafford for the higher tier services. But we nonetheless think that having Meesbrook as Jenny said, as a new ideally quite complete settlement with a full range of its own facilities is the best option open to us for the kind of next strategic location for growth in the borough. I'll just pick up on another Meesbrook question, which variants of came up a few times, which is about the rail station. And one quite perceptive question asked about the relationship between the rail station and the HS2 extension to Crewe, and whether or not the Meesbrook station could be delivered if the HS2 to Crewe station line doesn't go ahead. And the short answer is, based on the rail feasibility study, is that the answer is possibly not. The new HS2 line frees up the capacity that makes having a stopping service at Meesbrook more feasible. I think further work on rail would be needed to firm that up, but obviously at the moment that's a hypothetical. HS2 to Crewe hasn't been cancelled, but yeah, obviously that's something that we need to keep a watching brief on. I suppose to say in relation to rail that I mean, rail we think it's important to Meesbrook, but it's not going to be the only element of the transport strategy for the new settlement. And a really important thing and one of the advantages of the new settlement is in terms of short journeys. People's because it's at a scale where you could have a secondary school, then you can start moving some of the journeys to school. Ideally, off of the highway network, we might be able to have people walking or biking to school. And so it's not just about rail, but we think rail is important. Other questions about rail were about the viability of the rail station and the timing of its opening. What we've done so far is in terms of viability is a kind of strategic business case, like a high level feasibility. So we think it's feasible, but there isn't a detailed funding plan or detailed financial viability for the rail station. And likewise, in terms of the timing of its opening and the exact trigger for when a rail station would need to open by reference to number of houses that get built, that's something that would ultimately be fixed through a planning application. It's a level of detail that we just don't have the information to fix through the plan. Do you want me to keep going on Meesbrook, Jen? Because I've got there's one more question about Meesbrook town centre that came to mind, which is there's a question about which is a really good question about how we would ensure that Meesbrook town centre isn't of such a scale as to undermine the kind of, I guess, vitality of particularly Eccleshall, but I guess it also applies to Stone to some degree as well. And the answer is, and it's in the Meesbrook policy, that we and that's policy 7, is that we're preemptively putting in their caps for the amount of retail floor space that could be built at Meesbrook, so as that it doesn't become too big for and those are calculated by reference to the spending power of the future population of that settlement. So we want it to have enough of a town centre to serve its own population, but not such a town centre as to be a threat to Eccleshall. I mean, the reality is, from experience of new settlements across the country, it's more difficult to get a good town centre established than, I mean, if you had a town centre that was out competing Eccleshall, then that would be almost unprecedented for a new settlement, I think. And so I think the challenge is going to be to get a good town centre built there, but we are aware of that potential issue, and we want to keep it right sized for the new settlement rather than something that would start sucking trade out of Eccleshall, for example. Before we leave Meesbrook, Jen, were there any others that you wanted to come?
Yeah, I'll just come in on the generic question, which was why was Meesbrook chosen as the location? And basically the short answer of that is as part of the issues and options, it was put forward with 7 other locations. Those locations were assessed as part of the sustainability assessment, which can be viewed on our website. Then through the process of preparing the document we're now discussing, a number of detailed evidence-based studies were completed. Those include environmental factors such as infrastructure information and financial and viability assessments. And these again are available to view through our website as part of the evidence base of the preferred option. Based on all the evidence we had, we then did another sustainability appraisal, and generally this is the site that came out as the most sustainable location for large scale growth in terms of location, scale and accessibility and overall sustainability. One of quite a few questions came through was, well, what about the brownfield site that has been removed? Unfortunately, the MOD removed that site. Because of that, because we cannot guarantee it is going to come forward, we had to look at other land availability, and we have done this through discussions with the landowners. So no land has been put forward that the landowners aren't aware of. I don't know if we have just a couple more minutes to pick up some of the more generic questions which are on Meesbrook.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question about flood risk assessment and floods in Eccleshall in 2019, 20 and 21. Now, the strategic flood risk assessment that we published as part of the issues and options consultation back in 2020 was done in 2019. When we move through the spring of next year towards the publication version of the plan and the consultation that's timetabled for start in July of next year, we'll be looking at our flood risk evidence. One thing we know we have to do is what's called a level 2 strategic flood risk assessment. And as part of that, I think we'll have to look at whether we need to update any of our flood risk mapping from the level 1 assessment. And I know that there was a change to the planning practice guidance in relation to the definition of the functional floodplain in August of this year, and so that's something we need to look at. And any updates to the flood map that were to take into account flood events that have occurred in Eccleshall over the years subsequent to the publication of the current SFRA is something that we would need to look at as part of that. So yeah, I think the short answer is that's evidence that we're putting together. There was a question about self and custom build and how we would be ensuring that there were sites for health and self and custom build housing. The answer is policy 31 of the plan, where we propose a requirement for plots equivalent to 1% of all dwellings comprised in specific developments, one of which would be Meesbrook, the others are land at Ash Flats in Stafford, land at Marlborough Road Stone, land at east of Oakley Court Stone, and land east of Stafford Road Nosal, that they should be for self and custom build housing. So yeah, we've gone beyond just maintaining a list and are starting to introduce a requirement for some housing to be delivered as self and custom build. There was a question about green infrastructure connectivity. Is that one you can pick up?
Yeah, we've had a few questions about biodiversity, green infrastructure, biodiversity net gain. Obviously, all the questions that we've been asked, we can't answer in the sort of 5-10 minutes we've got. So all questions will be answered, and those answers will be put on our FAQ on our website. But generally, in terms of green infrastructure, climate change, biodiversity net gain, we have a piece of documentation called the Nature Recovery Network, which underpins a lot of the work we are doing. I want to stress, just because a certain thing isn't mentioned in the plan. I know someone asked about enhancements to the Doxy Marshes. Doesn't mean that we as a council will not be doing something. We have permissive policies to do with countryside enhancement, to do with biodiversity enhancements, and we obviously are very keen to do that. And it will just be delivered as by a separate piece of work. We have topic papers which can be reviewed in terms of biodiversity topic paper, climate change, and open space topic papers. In terms of connectivity, we will look towards the Nature Recovery Network documentation, and that will give us the framework on how we can do connectivity between all of our spaces. Obviously, it's a long-term project, and it's not something we can say we will be delivering X, Y, and Z within this time period, because obviously we need to take the time to look at that, because biodiversity net gain is a national issue that we're still waiting for guidance on. Also, as part of the local plan, we have included allocations for something called countryside enhancement areas, and those again are areas that we will be looking to do biodiversity gains.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm conscious that we're very, very quickly running out of time. I'm hoping that the session won't kick us all out at 8:30, so we might be able to stay on for maybe a few minutes after that. But if we do get kicked out in the next minute or so, I'd just like to say thank you very much for attending. This recording will be available on our website, as well as further information on the FAQs. We're keeping a record of the chat, so we'll be able to go through your questions carefully and make sure that we're coming up with some generic responses to those. Please spread the word about the public exhibitions and come along to those. Make sure you get your responses in by Monday, the 12th of December. And as I say, if we don't get kicked out in the next minute or so, we will be closing the event in the next few minutes. And so thank you very much for attending. So before we go, is there any further answers that you want to provide as a team to the questions that have been?
Yeah, I could just pick out.
Continue to answer questions for the next few minutes, and if that's permitted.
Okay, so I can. There were some questions about Stafford Town Centre and the Stafford Gateway development that I can maybe just briefly touch on. In relation to Stafford Gateway, there was a question about why the proposal is quite high density. I think the answer to that is that this is a pretty unique opportunity in terms of the location to be able to develop a site that's so close to the centre of Stafford and so well connected, both through the rail station and in terms of, I guess, walking into the Stafford Town Centre. And the view from the land promoters is that it is a site that would support more apartment development, although a large part of the scheme in the proposals that were recently consulted upon is still conventional family housing. I mean, from our point of view as planners, the more houses that can be built on a brownfield site in central Stafford, the fewer houses that would need to ultimately be built on greenfield sites at the edge of Stafford or elsewhere. There was another question about the Stafford Gateway, which is about its impact on Stafford Town Centre, which is an issue that we're very aware of, and the answer to that is much the same as kind of the answer I gave earlier for Meesbrook, in that we're within the policy for Stafford Gateway putting a limit on the amount of retail floor space that could be developed there, and also a specific requirement that it isn't of a type or scale that would compete with or detract from the town centre, which is just a policy requirement that applies to just that site. So we want to really not create something that is a competitor to Stafford Town Centre, but is a really complementary and adds to the offer of Stafford. But it's a very perceptive question. The other question that I spotted about Stafford Town Centre, was why we hadn't identified the entire town centre as a kind of strategic development location. which is an interesting question. I think my immediate response to that is to note that quite a lot of the town centre is a conservation area, and so it might not be suitable for kind of very large scale development, although I know that there are specific development projects within the town centre. We have got within the development strategy policy a Stafford town strategy, which talks about diversification of uses within the in the town centre. But if there are specific proposals that people want to see either as allocations or drawn out in Stafford Town Centre, then obviously this is not the final version of the plan. This is our preferred option, and so do by all means submit your comments and proposals for how we can improve or change the policies. Was there anything else that you wanted to come back on, Jen? I'm conscious that we've been speaking for quite a while. So.
No, that's fine. Obviously, as we've said, all the questions and answers will be put on our website. We are just discussing if we're able to circulate specifically to people who have attended, but we're not 100% sure on that. We think we can, but they will be on our website in a future date, not too far from now.
Just before we finish, there was a comment just now to us from Sue Bramwell asking the presenters to explain their roles, and perhaps I can just quickly do that. We are all officers of the council, which means we're not elected politicians. Alex is the team leader who has overall responsibility for preparing the new local plan, and Jenny, Megan and myself are members of Alex's team. So we support him in preparing the evidence to support the plan and drafting the plan policies and other documents. So essentially that's our role.
Great. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We really appreciate your interest and your engagement in the plan, and just thank you to the team for all your support as well. We will now be closing the event. But please do continue to look on our website to have further information in terms of the recording and the frequently asked questions. But I hope you all have a great rest of the evening, and hopefully we will see some of you at our exhibitions over the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much, and good evening.